What is happening, fishing friends? Welcome to another episode of DEBO'S Fishing. Somebody asked me the other day, why are you using that hook for flipping? Well, you know what? I thought about it, and when it comes to selecting a hook, I've really broken it down into three things that I think make it easier when you're rigging a soft plastic for fishing bass. Size, style, and strength. Hope these tips will help you. Let's take a look. To the size of the hook, you're going to find two different sizes when you look on a package, or two different ways the size is going to be shown. You're going to either find a size that has just a number, or you're going to find a size that has a number /0, okay, which means aught. So if you're looking at a hook that has just a number, remember that the bigger the number is, the smaller the hook will be. So this is a size 4, it's about the size of my fingernail. If this were a size 20, it would be smaller. If this hook was a size 1, it would be bigger than a size 4. Okay? Now when you get into the aught sizes, the bigger the aught size, the bigger the hook. So a 1/0 hook would be smaller than a 2/0. Or for example, a 4/0 hook is bigger than a 2/0. All right, the second S, style. Now this kind of first ties into the size, because before you get into the style, like I said, you want to learn your size, but you want to match the size of the hook to your lure. So this is a little 3/0 extra wide gap hook. We'll go into what that means here in a second, but you want to make sure that before you pick the style, you've got the right size for it. So as you can see, this hook fits this bait perfect. This is a 3/0, which is what I would use for this. If I had like a 4 or 5/0, and that hook came all the way down here, it was too big for the bait, that's where it would go. It's obviously too big of a hook, you need to go down some. So you need to pick the correct size. Once you've got your size determined, the style. So there's three different main types of style of hook that I'm going to use for bass fishing. The first is an EWG, or extra wide gap hook. The extra wide gap hook, EWG hook, has a large round belly on it, and it's also got a hook point that is in line with the hook eye. Okay, it's going to be very important for certain types of baits. After that, you've got a round bend worm hook, or just a worm hook, a lot of people call them. So the bend of the hook, it doesn't have as large of a belly. It's got a flat shank that turns into that belly. And then it's got a hook point that is not quite in line with the eye, as you can see there. The point is a little bit higher up here than the eye. And lastly, you've got, in the bass fishing world, a flipping hook, okay, or a J hook. It's got a large straight shank, turns into the belly, and then you've got the point of the hook. Not even close to being in line with one another. And that's one of the biggest advantages of this hook. So you've got your three main styles right there. Let's move on to the third S, strength. When you get into the strength of a hook, you want to think about what you're throwing around, okay? Also, what type of gear you're using. So as you can see here, we've got two sets of EWG hooks. One is just a regular EWG. The other is a heavy wire. The heavy wire hook is going to be a thicker wire, a larger diameter of wire. Okay, so it's going to be less likely to bend or, bend out when you're fishing in thicker cover, or if you're fishing for bigger fish. Also depends on what type of gear you're using. If you're just using a medium action, like spinning reel, we'll say, and you just want to throw a weightless Senko, just a regular wire hook or even a lighter wire hook would be great for that, because you're not going to have the power to set the hook in a medium action rod. You're going to want to just reel into it and, and lightly set the hook if you're using, let's say, like, 8-pound line. Whereas if I'm fishing 20-pound fluorocarbon and I'm fishing on a bunch of wood, I'm going to go to a heavy wire hook to ensure that I can set that hook hard, get a good hook penetration, and get them wrenched out of that grass. Now, what's this all mean? Okay, so we've gone over the three S's, size, style, and strength. Let's put it into some real-world applications. These are going to be some of your more common, frequently used soft plastics. So how do you rig them up? What hooks best? Well, we'll start with thin-bodied lures, like a ringtail worm, or a ribbon-tail worm, excuse me, or a stick bait, a Senko, or even like a flick shake. Something where it's just a narrow body, long and slender. I'm always going to go with the worm hook. When you're fishing a worm like this, let's say this hook is actually through the plastic, and it's sitting right there. Okay? When the fish, we'll turn it around this way. When the fish bites that lure and grabs onto it, okay, that hook is sticking up out of there. You're generally going to have a better hookup ratio on a round bend worm hook like this. But let's say you had this worm rigged like that. You set the hook and the fish pulls the plastic down. He bites it, pulls the whole thing down. You don't have a whole bunch of plastic down here, like if you were fishing a beaver bait or a flipping style bait, to get all messed up and caught in the back of that hook. It's a thin lure, so you can get away with working a hook like this. But a Senko works perfect for this too. You have a good straight application, good presentation, with generally a better hookup ratio. As you can see, that hook is sticking up above the bait. Fish bites it, it's going to direct it into the lip of the fish. I want to move on to chunkier baits, like a flipping bait. I'm going to go to the round bellied extra wide gap hook. A couple things. I want to make sure my hook sits nice and straight and flush on the back of that lure. So you can see when I rig that hook in there, it sits nice and straight on the back. I've got a nice, perfectly straight bait. But when that fish bites it here, notice that the bait is all in one line. The hook is all in one line. So theoretically, that's supposed to decrease your hookup ratio. Personally, I love the extra wide gap. I use it most of the time. And I don't notice a huge difference. But I know a lot of people that don't even use these anymore. They stick with a round bend or a flipping hook because they feel like they don't get the hookup ratio. Now, one thing that you want to make sure when you set the hook on these, you always set straight up. So if this is in the water going around, the fish bites it, and you set the hook straight up and overhead, it's going to turn that bait like this and set that hook up into their lip. So I'm always going with a hard overhead hook set. So the second thing is it keeps it all in line. Perfect if you're, flipping brush or some sort of stand-up cover. But also, when the fish bites it and it moves that plastic down like this, I've got a bigger belly, a bigger place for all that plastic to go when that fish bites it. Okay, when it all kind of balls up here. If this is a round bend worm hook, it'd be completely stuck like that and you wouldn't have any hook point exposed. Something like this, it's going to give you more of a chance to get that fish if he does ball it all up down there. If you're somebody that's using a round bend hook like that, and it all balls up on the bottom, you might want to try going to something like this because the bait you're using might just have too much plastic. Now, the extra wide gap hook I'm also always going to use on my flukes because you want your fluke to stay perfectly straight to make sure the action stays good in the water. Also, when you fish an extra wide gap hook like this, you usually don't even have to expose the hook inside of it in the plastic. It'll sit perfectly straight just like that. Also, when they do take the fluke, it's got a whole lot of room to move down there with that large belly. Lastly, the flipping hook. Flipping hook I'm always going to use when I'm in grass, when I've got a lot of heavy vegetation, and I will use it a lot of times in wood too. It really just kind of depends what kind of tackle I have. If I do have, usually I've got my big, and this bait's already getting tore up, but you'll see what it does anyway. You'll get the point. That's how I'm going to rig my flipping hook. Now, the great part of flipping hooks are they have this keeper. So this keeper is a little point. It keeps your bait up top without them ripping it off, or if you're trying to bring it through vegetation without it slipping down every time. You can see I'm pulling on it here. That keeper has it right where I want it. I guess the cons to this are, do remember that you're going to have to set your hook harder, because on a flipping hook, you're going to run the edge of that hook just to the end of the plastic and stop. You're not going to expose it. You're not going to run it through and run it back under the plastic. There is also more of a chance if it does get pulled down, because that hook point is not sticking through, that it can ball up on you, and you'll have this happen a lot. So it's kind of a 50-50 on that. I feel there are a lot of good pros to it, but there are some cons too. It also does tear up the front of your bait with that keeper. Usually after one or two fish, the front of that's pretty roasted out. You're going to have to switch your bait. But hey, if I'm catching fish, I'll go through a bait per fish each time. So just remember, there are special times when you want to use each one of these. Each one has its application. Okay, we just went over the 3 S's: size, style, and strength. So I hope this helps you all the next time you walk down the daunting hook aisle and see hundreds of different options. Keep it simple. For bass fishing, this is targeted completely at bass fishing. That's mostly what I do. You've got your 3 styles. Pick the right size for the right bait that you're using. Don't pick something too big. And if you're fishing, say, a big 10-inch worm, don't pick a little 1/0 hook. Not going to work very well. The style, match the style to your bait. If you've got a bait that's fatter, like a flipping bait like this, you're going to want to go with a thicker hook, a flipping hook or an extra wide gap hook. If you're fishing just a little slender bait, like the old ringtail worm, just use the worm hook. You don't need to go with some big, huge, extra wide gap. If you're fishing the old stenko, the old stick bait, it's really up to you. You can use either the worm hook or the extra wide gap. And then you get into the strength. If you're fishing around a lot of cover, you're fishing a big, huge, heavy rod, go with the heavy hook. Go with a thicker gauged hook. If you're finessing, if you're going with just like a medium power spinning rod, when you're flipping a weightless senko, you can drop down. You can drop down to a thinner wire hook, because you are going to, when you set that hook, you're not going to have as much power. So you wouldn't want to be fishing a big 5/0 flipping hook on a medium power spinning reel. It just doesn't work. You're not going to have the power to set that hook. If you're fishing a bigger, thicker hook, you want a heavier setup. All right? So I hope this helps you all. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. I would be more than happy to answer. Till next time, remember, keep casting, because if you're not casting, you can't catch the fish. Be a responsible fisherman or fisherwoman. And until next time,